Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to wait just a few minutes before we get started to let some people join. But while you join, tell us where you're joining from. Where in the world are you? Real quick, I'm Taylor. I'm here in Copenhagen. We usually get people from all over the world joining these webinars, and it's super fun to get to see where you are from. Awesome. Oh, Texas. I'm from Seattle originally, but one of my colleagues is from Texas. Awesome. I mean, people are excited. We've hit critical mass already, so we're going to just dive in straight away. Welcome. Once again, welcome to today's webinar on best practices in carbon reporting and net zero strategy. Our team at Normative has spent the last few months designing a data-informed net zero strategy, and I'm super excited that I get to give you a peek into this process. Before we jump into the details, just a little housekeeping for today's webinar. We're going to aim for a 45 to 50 minute duration just to be super respectful of your time. But to be noted, the webinar will be recorded. That will come into your inbox sometime either later today or tomorrow, just in case you missed something or you want to return to a great soundbite. Please do submit questions. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of the webinar today. We're going to use Livestorm's built-in Q&A feature. So please do use that to ask a question. And at the end, we'll save some time to go through as many as we possibly can. If you put them in the Q&A feature, that means we will be able to collect them and respond to them. And if we were to run out of time, we'll be sure to hit all of the ones that we miss directly to your email. And last but not least, we're always striving to create better content here at Normative. We really want to make sure it's relevant and interesting for you. So after this webinar, we're going to send a 1-minute survey. Your feedback is so helpful for us. Please do share that. And we wanted to start off with a poll. We know this webinar is all about reporting and net zero planning. So just to gauge where our audience is at, we wanted to do this poll. The question today is, have you started a net zero plan at your organization? The poll will pop up on your screen if it hasn't already. And interesting results that a lot of people are talking about it or haven't started or have a long way to go. I'd love to talk to the 7 people who are confident yeses. And the rest are yes, but we have a long way to go. Well, you are in luck because this webinar is exactly about that topic. It's really about how to take your reporting and your net zero planning to the next level. So what are we going to cover today? My name is Taylor. I'll be your webinar host. I'm a product marketing manager based here in Copenhagen, and I've been at Normative for over a year now. I'm going to be your host. I'll do the Q&A at the end and jump in a few times, but I am really thrilled to be joined by some amazing experts in this area. So I will then pass the mic over to Sam Priest and Brian Hartland, who are from PwC based in the UK. They will do a little quick introduction to themselves once we get to their section, but what they're going to cover is what makes a great sustainability report, why it's important to do these sorts of environmental and ESG reports, and share some of their recommendations for best practices and common errors to avoid. We'll then come back to my Normative colleague, Zmisier, who is our climate strategist. And Zmisier is going to walk you through the process we used at Normative that used Normative, the carbon calculation, to generate our environmental report. And last but not least, we'll come to our CEO, Kristian, who will talk about our process of developing a net zero plan and the things that we've learned in the process. So just to kick off this webinar with a quick intro to Normative. At Normative, our mission is to make known and reduce the sustainability impact of all economic activities on the planet. And we approach this challenge from many different angles. So Kristian, who you'll hear from today, Kristian comes from academia and research. and has a lot of experience working with agencies like the EU and the UN. Normative as a company is the co-founder of the SME Climate Hub and partners with all sorts of organizations around the world. We also partner with tech companies like Google, who supported us in the development of the Business Carbon Calculator, which is a free carbon accounting tool for small businesses. And then our team more widely comes from companies like Pecan, Spotify, and SAP. So we have a lot of experience both with scale-ups as well as really more bigger and traditional companies like SAP. And why Normative? What we do is we deliver accurate carbon emissions through scopes 1, 2, and 3 so that you and your organization can make immediate and verifiable reductions. This is important because businesses like yours need accurate carbon accounting, not only to prepare a sustainability report, but also to actually identify the carbon reduction initiatives that you'd use in your net zero plan to help you figure out how to get to net zero and hold yourself accountable along the way. And how do we do this? We deliver comprehensive coverage across scopes 1, 2, and 3, and we use a database of over 9,000 emissions factors and 26,000 categorizations. That means we're able to match each business activity to the appropriate emissions factor. And automation is really essential in that process so that we can gather the best and most high quality data in a straightforward, fast, and user-friendly way. And most importantly at Normative, everything that we do is built on a foundation of scientific integrity. We always are incorporating the latest scientific research into our calculations to ensure that they're compliant and trustworthy. And why is all of this important for sustainability reporting? When you're building a report, you need to be confident that you have 100% coverage of emissions. You don't want a surprise to come out of the woodwork somewhere down the road because your calculations weren't thorough. You also need to be confident that your calculations are backed up by real science. And I think most importantly, you need automation so that you don't spend hundreds of hours on calculation. That would just suck up all of your time. That time should be spent designing and evaluating reduction initiatives to help you make progress towards net zero. Now I am super happy to pass the mic over to Sam Priest and Brian Hartland from PwC to talk more about environmental reporting best practices. Please take it away, Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sam Priest. I'm a director at PwC. I look after our sustainability reporting practice. And just firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to come and speak here. Big thank you to Normative for the invitation. We consider Normative friends of PwC and we enjoy working together in this important area. I'm personally passionate about reporting, sustainability reporting. I believe it's not just about compliance, but it's also about creating a solid foundation of data and information that can help you have a strategic advantage and create true value in your organizations. So we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about, firstly, some principles for reporting, good reporting, and elements of a great report, and some of the key stakeholders in a sustainability reporting process. And then I'll hand over to my colleague, Brian, to talk more around the carbon side of things. So first of all, reporting has really increased in terms of its visibility and importance. Investors are clearly interested. They want to see comparable information that they can make investment grade decisions on. And they're increasingly expecting the companies that they invest in to disclose more information. Customers continue to be at the forefront of driving this. They want to see differentiated products and they want to understand how the businesses they provide custom to and work with have a role in reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions. And suppliers and partners up and down the value chain are looking for alignment in terms of how your business is performing. Finally, before I get to regulators, a really important point. I think most of us who are aligned in terms of purpose want to work in organizations that fit with your objectives. So being able to clearly disclose and share information on that to your employees and potential employees is a really critical value factor. And finally, we're seeing an increased rollout in the amount of regulation and the mandatory amount of reporting and disclosure that's required. So initially, maybe that's just for big organizations or listed organizations that are caught by regulations in certain jurisdictions. But what we're seeing is the suppliers to those organizations are increasingly being asked to provide more information too. So 4 principles of good reporting. So I think, first of all, you need to explain why this is important to your company. Setting out that purpose and intent is really critical at the start. Secondly, explaining clearly and articulately where you are on the journey. Transparency on this point is critical. Not everybody is expected to be at the end of that journey, as the poll's shown already. Some may be just at the beginning, but being clear and transparent about that and having alignment with your data is really, really important. Clear and concise reporting is also valuable. This will help with the communication, the speed, as there'll be many stakeholders, as we'll see, who'll be looking at this information and allowing them to see the important and key messages for you is really critical. And finally, just providing explanation of the nature of the information provided. So setting the context, setting the source, and being really clear. As reporting requirements are requiring you to move to assurance, having clarity on the sources and the basis of that information makes the work of auditors and assurers much easier and much quicker. And it also leads to transparency in your organization. In terms of what makes a great report, there are many factors, but the key for me is to focus on your material topics. So completing a materiality assessment and understanding which topics are most important and most valuable to your organization, those material topics, is really, really important. It will help you get that speed and conciseness of reporting. Secondly, if you align your report to a recognized standard, that will really help. It will help with comparability and clarity on your reporting. You should consider your report and consider it in the context of other activities, whether it's a standalone report or an integrated report. You should understand the implications for other parts of your reporting and disclosures. There may be statements that you make in your sustainability report that have a direct impact on your financial statement. At PwC, that's a very important topic for us to make sure there's transparency, not only on the non-financial, but also on the financial implications of some of those statements. And finally, seeking third-party assurance at whatever level helps to build credibility and confidence in what you're doing. Next, we'll just talk a little around stakeholders. We all know that there are many stakeholders interested in your reporting, but having those stakeholders engaged and sharing information with those interested parties will really help activate and accelerate your plans. Clear messaging and data to support it will help you with your employees, as we've discussed, but also with society, press, and others in communications. Having information ready and in an acceptable format to provide to suppliers, regulators, and others will also help make your business more efficient when it comes to sharing information and sharing your journey. And finally, I'm going to pass over to Brian to talk a little around the carbon side of things.
Great. Thank you, Sam, and thank you to the Normative team for inviting us here today. I'm Brian Hartland. I'm a director at PwC, leading a number of our net zero transformation projects. I've been working in sustainability advisory for the last 18 years with companies around the world to help develop and implement their plans to transform their products and supply chains. So really happy to be here today. So I guess building on what Sam is saying, the importance of accuracy is really the forefront of a lot of conversations that we're having with clients right now. Although there are frameworks and guidance on what to do in terms of reporting, putting that into practice isn't always so straightforward. And we see many companies fall into a trap of making vague, incomplete, or sometimes even just wrong reporting unintentionally. So, which is why we found in a recent survey from investors that they've really lost confidence in a number of sustainability reports, that they find that there's maybe some evidence of greenwashing within a report. As the data behind corporate climate reporting is undergoing scrutiny, not only from investors, but civil society in particular, companies need to evolve their approaches. And they need to do that in order to build trust, but also maintain trust and to not lose that over time or let it erode. Companies are being asked to share more and more data, in particular around product emissions or carbon intensity. Some of that's driven by regulation, some is by their own customer or client interest. And we find that behind many of the headlines in the reports, there's a lot of uncertainty in those numbers. So once you start digging, there's a lot of approximation or missing data and a lot of estimates, especially when we get to the supply chain topic. We feel that accurate measurement is really critical to guide a company, the actions they take to provide investors with confidence to direct capital towards true sustainable projects and to really meet the expectations of civil society. And ultimately, we need this information to understand, are we on track or not to limit global warming? I wanted to outline, I guess, a few of the challenges that we see when speaking to clients and how we build, I guess, greater trust in climate data. We know data is an issue, but again, it's not going to solve the problem just as we improve the data alone. So I'll go through a few of the key messages we're seeing. A lot of the larger companies, in particular multinationals or listed companies, have begun measuring their scope 1 and 2 many years ago. Some of them are quite mature, others are on a journey. However, the vast majority of companies, if you're looking globally, are still at quite early stages, and there's some really strong regional gaps where the data is poor quality or doesn't exist yet. Scope 3 emissions are much more complex. This is most evident in supply chain emissions, where they can be up to 11 times greater than operational emissions if you're a company that's an industrial company of some sort, or if you manufacture a product. One of the main other Scope 3 categories that present challenges are product-related emissions. So again, if you make something that's energy using or something that consumes perhaps hot water or something downstream, how you estimate that, how you measure that. We know that estimating and tracking Scope 3, let alone reporting it, is very complicated, in particular if you're just starting out. The good news, from my perspective, is that, well, there's not perfect data available for every company and every product. It doesn't mean that there's not useful, actionable data that you can begin your journey and start to take an incremental approach. And I think we'll hear more from the Normative team of their approach and what they've done, in particular for Scope 3 around that, and happy to take any questions later. Sticking on the point of Scope 3, because I feel it is one of the most complex and where we're getting the most questions and challenges from different clients and companies, is that it requires a lot of estimation, it requires modeling, it requires extrapolation of data, all areas that could be time consuming, require specific expertise that may not be in-house, and it can confuse stakeholders if you get it wrong or if you stick all that detail into an annex of your report. Due to that complexity, we've seen a lot of companies for many years just report on really the Scope 3 emissions that are easy to measure, such as business travel and others, and maybe not the ones that are most material, such as supply chain or product use. But as we see the role of technology come in, it's important in the sense that it can streamline the process. It can bring robust and credible approaches to the market at pace, and it can reduce the risk of error of under or over reporting your emissions. I guess we should be clear that the world is not on track right now in terms of meeting the reduction targets it's set out to do, and reporting alone won't do that. But it does enable and it does drive change. So once the numbers are out there, companies are motivated to reduce them. There is an area to collaborate with partners to do that and really take on the supply chain and operational transformation that's needed. I'm going to hand back over to Taylor from Normative to take us into the next part of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Brian and Sam. It's been super great to have your expertise here for this webinar. And I would say again to the audience, we are really fortunate that they'll both be joining us for the Q&A at the end of this session. So please do throw in your questions, ideally in the Q&A feature, but the chat works too. We'll collect those. But we really want to give you the special kind of office hours opportunity to ask those questions to people with real expertise. What we have now, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to my colleague at Normative, Smeesir. Smeesir is a senior climate strategist, and he'll give you a little bit of his background, but he's going to walk you through exactly how we used Normative, the product, to calculate Normative, the company's emissions profile. Please take it away, Smeesir.
Thank you, Taylor. Hello, everyone. I'm Smeesir. I work here at Normative as a senior climate strategy advisor, and today I will walk you through our own journey and our own process when it comes to the data collection and calculation. And here you see on the screen is a typical journey, and we always start with a kickoff meeting where we invite the relevant stakeholders. and discuss the methodology, data requirements, the deadlines for the project, and expectations. Then we spend some time collecting the data every year, and since it's our own report, I have to be involved in data collection as well. And then the data is analyzed, and we use the output of that process in the sustainability report. And this is the end of the measure part, but it's not the end of the sustainability work. So we try to focus on collecting good data to make sure that it enables us for the continued success. And this part, Kristian will cover more later in this webinar, and I'll focus on first three, and we'll share our own insights and perhaps tips and tricks how things went when we collected the data for this report. Starting with the kickoff, I cannot emphasize it more that it's really important to include the right stakeholders from the very beginning. And I'm talking about both external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. And in our case, we, of course, had to involve people from different departments that are data owners. But also, of course, we had to collaborate with the landlords and the waste collection companies to make sure we get the right data. And it's really important that the data collection requirements are clear. And I think we all, as sustainability professionals, are cursed with knowledge. We believe that what we know is much more common knowledge than it actually is. And I think it's important to remember that not everybody knows a lot about sustainability or carbon accounting in general. And we need to explain in perhaps simpler words what exactly we want to see in the end, what data we want to get in order to produce the report. After the kickoff, we start the data collection process, and I think very important to keep in mind that you should not skip any categories, and it's true for all three scopes, for scope 1, 2, and 3, and especially perhaps for scope 3, because as you know, there are 15 categories in total, and not all of them are relevant to you, of course, but what you need to do is first to understand whether they are relevant or not. So you need to do some sort of a screening. And secondly, you need to understand whether they are significant or not. And what we see working with our customers, what kind of data is often skipped is waste generated in operations and employee commuting. And I wanted to share some insight of our own journey, how we collect this data. So when it comes to waste, we generate waste in our 3 offices. It's in Stockholm, Copenhagen, and London. And we have pretty good data from our Stockholm office because our waste collection company collects waste and measures it, and every year we get a beautiful report. So we really have a good understanding of our waste generation there. But it's not true for our Copenhagen and London offices. So what we did this year is a sampling technique. It's called bin survey, and no, we didn't ask waste bins what they think. We simply measured waste every day during 2 weeks, and we bought the luggage scales and we just measured it. And when we collected this data for 2 weeks, we believed that this waste generation pattern is the same in the entire year, and we extrapolated the data. And it's not a perfect technique, but it's better than nothing, at least to understand how significant is your impact. And if you have a more complex organization than ours, you could always group your locations and sites with similar outputs, and you can measure waste in some locations and then extrapolate it in different groups. When it comes to employee commuting, I think it's often omitted, but I would say it's quite simple data to collect. We always recommend to share a survey with your employees to collect this data. And the survey is quite short. It's from 5 to 7 questions, and you collect at the same time the data for employee commuting and working from home. And what we do is just send out a survey, and of course you will never have 100% response rate. We ourselves have 60% or so, which is quite high. But what you do is you get as much as possible, and then you extrapolate these results to the entire population of your employees. And if your organization is more complex, you could always send out a survey per country, per entity, per business unit, and then extrapolate within those groups. And this will make your total employee commuting emissions. Other points I have on the slide is it's important to question the data you receive. It's tightly connected to the one point I mentioned before, that we are cursed with knowledge, and we could always explain the requirements and be very clear, but people make mistakes. And the data we get should be screened to make sure there are not wild inconsistencies. And you need to question it and just to have a more critical look at the data. And I think it's really important also to be involved in the data analysis process. I'm not a data analyst. We have a separate team here at Normative that works with data full-time. But I believe it's important to be involved, to understand where the emissions come from, which emissions factors were used, which sources were used, to be able to translate this data to other stakeholders involved in the project and the wider audience. And last part I will talk about is sustainability report. Nothing revolutionary here, but I still think it's important to emphasize that you need to have strict internal deadlines for reviewing and suggestions. Your report can always be better. And I think at some point it's important to draw the line and release the report as it is. And of course, you have many people involved in the sustainability report narration. So you need to make sure that everybody responds in time, and then you consider the opinion of stakeholders that should be considered. Let somebody else read your report. I think it's a good reminder after you read your draft 10 or more times. You stop noticing errors, you stop noticing inconsistencies. So it's good if other people have a look, and especially people perhaps with a lower knowledge in sustainability, to make sure that the report is suitable for a wider audience. And the last but on the list is be transparent. I think it's a good tip always, but when it comes to the report, I think it's important not only to disclose your emissions and the categories of emissions, but also the methodology that was used, your assumptions, and the activities where the emissions come from. And if you don't have any space for it in the main part of the report, feel free to add an appendix. And we have several appendices in our own report. And I think any sustainability professional would appreciate to have this extra nitty-gritty details that could be checked in order to understand the report. And that's all I had from me. As I said, this is only the first part, the measure journey, and you need to complete it in time to make sure that you actually can work with your data and make reasonable actions to reduce your emissions. And I will hand over to Kristian that will talk about our own journey.
All right. Thanks a lot for that presentation, Smitsier. So I want to deep dive into our data-driven net zero plan that is also in our sustainability report. And for context, we have the ambition to go net zero by 2030. So I'm going to cram in what will be a 7-year or so plan into the next 5 minutes, which is going to be a challenge in and of itself, right? So to start, like Smitsier went through the data collection and carbon accounting, which is really the foundation of everything we do, because we have a data-driven approach to net zero. But carbon accounting is only the first step, right? So based on that carbon accounting, that informed specific actions that we need to take over the next 7 years to achieve net zero. But then taking that a step further, you need to operationalize that. So having a clear sustainability policies and in general policies related to sustainability is quite crucial in order to operationalize this type of information. And I'm going to go through all of that. So if you want to read more, please download our sustainability report. It is on our website, but I'm going to give you some of the nuggets and highlights in the next few minutes. So to sort of summarize, I mean, based on the data that we crunched, we discovered obviously that almost all of our emissions are in our scope 3. I mean, around almost 99% of emissions. But with the granular emissions data on specific categories, we were able to identify some core things that we believe that we can do in order to reduce emissions. And the first one is to actually engage with our suppliers. And we believe that if we manage to get our suppliers on board on the net zero train and go towards net zero emissions as well, at least for the services that they're providing to us, that can reduce around 60%. Well, I mean, depending on how you count, it would be like 99% because almost all of our emissions are in our upstream scope 3. But that wouldn't allow for many other more specific actions. So the second action is to have renewable and energy efficient servers. We run a lot of software. We deploy our own software, but we also use other software services. So to engage with them and make sure that everything is renewable is quite important. Then third, we have a lot of equipment. We use a lot of computer screens, furniture, etc. for our offices to make sure that all of those are either leased or that we have some sort of contract with an actor that can make sure that there is a good end of life of that product. So ideally being reused to extend the lifetime as long as possible for all of the items that we have in our offices. Then sustainable pensions. I'm going to cover that a little bit more later on because that was a bit of a surprising category actually. But making sure and try to work with our employees to choose the most sustainable plans for their pensions will have an impact. Then renewable and energy efficient offices to make sure that we have the right certification for the buildings where we have our offices, especially as we're expanding, minimize travel. Then we have a vegan policy for all of the food, all of the events that we're hosting and so on, because some vegan options usually are like 1/10 of the emissions of a non-vegan option. And then finally, to minimize waste in all of our operations. The reason this one is quite low is because we're doing quite good on that already. And most waste and biggest impact from waste will actually be around the electronics, which is already covered in Action 3. So we discovered all of this by crunching our data. So some sort of surprising things that we learned. One first takeaway is that even if you have years of experience, such as yourself, we always discover something new when you go through this. So for instance, something that wasn't top of mind for me, which is sort of crazy now when I think about it in hindsight, is that we didn't think about the pensions properly. And that for us was a bit of a quick win when we discovered through this data-driven approach that, like almost 6% of our emissions are from those pensions. We're now working with our provider of pensions to redefine an entry plan that is a Schedule 9 fund according to the SFDR. And that sort of just tells the story that if you just have the eyes open and the most accurate data, then you can find some of these quick wins that might shade even some percentage points of your total emissions. Then secondly, what we discovered from actually drinking our own champagne is what all of our clients knew already, that net zero strategy is a culture building opportunity where we actually all need to cooperate and work together to sort of operationalize these actions that will bring us towards net zero emissions. And inside of your report, you can sort of see this full relationship playing out from the hotspots and the clear categories that we identified in each scope, the actions that we're taking to address this category, but also linkages to our sustainability policy and the specific things that we're doing to minimize our emissions. So you can see that also on the subcategory level, not just the overarching category of, for instance, purchased goods and services, but legal and accounting services and real estate and textiles, which is some of the swag that we have inside of the company. And I think this way of mapping things from just data to operationalized policies is quite helpful. So in general, what are best practices for net zero planning? It is, of course, to start early. So you have more time to learn and to iterate before your net zero plan is being scrutinized. So the earlier to start, the better it will become, because this is not a quick race, it's a marathon. And your business context is also essential. So you need to set both and monitor both absolute and relative targets in general. So for us, that was to set the right intensity figures, because we're a growing climate solutions company and we actually want to grow over time. And also be as specific as you can in your reduction planning. And so you can hold your organization accountable. And to me, that is sort of the main learning overall related to that accountability, that as our Chief Operations Officer, Maggie, usually says, that specific is terrific. And for us, that meant having and linking all of these actions to some of our policies. So here you can just see a rough overview of what some of that looked like. So we essentially assigned a color coding of prioritization. So inside of our sustainability policy. So we have some strict requirements, for instance, where we always serve vegan food in our events. We always go by train if the travel is less than 6 hours. Then we have some strongly encouraged requirements where we can sort of flex on it if it is impossible to find any option that adheres to that. And then finally, we have the things that are encouraged. And we based all of this color coding on the data that we have, where our emission hotspots originate from. So things where we think it will really move the needle is absolutely required, whilst things where it has a sort of marginal impact and the cost to benefit ratio, if you will, is quite low, we tend to encourage them. So I think that level of specificity is really, really helpful. And my final point is really that decarbonizing in scope 3 is a cross-industry effort. So the earlier you frame it as such, the likelier you are to succeed. And what I mean by that specifically is to engage with your value chain, work with your suppliers. If you're a large enterprise with a complex value chain, building and changing that value chain might take up to a decade at least. So the earlier you start, the better it will become, because this is like the world's biggest and most important collaborative cross-industry exercise there is to go net zero. And it's never too early or too late to start carbon accounting, I think is the final point here. And I might be sort of stretching the time limit here, so I'm gonna end with that.
Thank you so much, Kristian. We like a cool follow-up to Kristian's talk is that our very next webinar is on the value chain. So Michelle is going to put up a webinar page CTA, so you can see this on your screen. This is the exact topic. We have some really cool speakers from Zurich Insurance and from Nordea. So come join us in 2 weeks. Kristian will be back once again to talk with us on our webinar, but it's a very nice way to transition there. We also have a, if any of this was intriguing to you, if any of this you want to learn more about how normative calculations might support your business in reporting and in net zero planning, you can also check out our website. You can find a demo there for free to learn more about how we tackle this. But here we are. As we promised, we're at the Q&A. We've got some really great questions in the chat. I think the first one was an interesting one for Sam or Brian to take, which was what is the difference between assurance and auditing?
Yeah, I can take that one. So there'll be slightly different definitions in different jurisdictions, depending on where you are. But a simplified version would be an audit is a way of checking the accuracy of information that's contained. So cross-referencing numbers, for example, that might take the form of an audit, could be completed by internal or external functions. Assurance is typically the checking of that overall, checking the completeness and the accuracy, usually done by a third party and often against a recognized standard or protocol. So there's a bit of checking that goes on there. Hopefully that helps.
Excellent. I think, Smitir, a great one for you would be this question with net zero target setting. Once you reach net zero, are you then expected to offset remaining emissions? And is that expensive?
I have a very long answer, but I'll try to squeeze it in a few minutes. So when you have your net zero target, the expectation is that you will reduce 90% of your emissions, around 90%, and then you have 10% of unavoidable emissions. And those emissions you are expected to compensate. And I choose the word compensate over offset because I think offset as a concept has a negative connotation. And by compensation, I mean high quality projects. So it won't be enough to just plant the trees. There will be other projects available that fulfill the requirements. And when it comes to the prices, I believe the market is unfortunately immature at the moment when it comes to compensations, but I believe that the demand for such a market is quite high. So we'll see many more projects to be available on the market, and the price, of course, will go down.
Maybe I could add to that. I mean, right now, high quality removals are expensive. I mean, if it is cheap, then it's probably not high quality, and then you might probably engage in greenwashing. So if it is expensive, the good stuff is more expensive. And that is why I think it's so important to actually reduce emissions, both internally in your value chain. So, I mean, if you set that as a benchmark, that more expensive price of carbon, you're doing yourself a favor by reducing as much as possible instead.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kristian. And I think the next one I would actually hand back to you, which is one that we did a webinar on not that long ago, but this question around the difference between ESG reporting versus what we often talk about, which is kind of the zoomed in look at carbon reporting specifically. Kristian, could you just give us the high level, what do you see as the difference between those two?
I mean, obviously carbon reporting and net zero. And with carbon reporting, I mean, greenhouse gas reporting. I mean, we work with other greenhouse gases than carbon. So I just want to point that out. But obviously, greenhouse gases and net zero is a subset of ESG. But I think it's important to focus on that subset. I mean, my prediction is that, ESG is one of those terms that hopefully will die because it will be so fully integrated into the business. I mean, to have one poor sustainability director being responsible for everything related to sustainability is a very, very hard ask. So hopefully we will go towards specialization, where you have specialization in carbon, where we have specialization in, social, employee-related issues or health and safety issues, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're seeing this more and more.
Thank you, Kristian. I think a few that I can answer real quick myself. I saw a few questions about PACT, about CSRD. The answer is yes. Normative can handle all of those frameworks, and we stay really up to date on the regulations and what's coming down the pipeline. We are really triaging your questions in real time because these are great questions. I think I want to wrap up with one of my own questions, and we'll be sure to get to all of these others by email. So we will, if you've written them in the chat or in the Q&A, we've got your contact, so we'll follow up directly. But the question that I would ask to each of you is, if you were to give advice to someone who is just starting out, they're just starting out on their sustainability report or on their net zero plan, and they're super overwhelmed because it seems huge and intimidating, what's the advice that you would give them on day one? Smisir, do you want to kick us off?
No, I think I think the most important thing is that you have to start somewhere. And the idea is that it's an iterative process. So you should try to be better and better and collect more data to be more accurate. But it's better to do something than nothing. And I think any company should start working on their sustainability, because we're all connected through the value chain. And I think start somewhere, be better. And think about what you've achieved, and think about what you can improve. And start now, because if you're thinking about the data collection for 2023, you should start thinking about this now, how to improve the process and how to collect better data.
Kristian, what about you?
No, I agree. I have nothing to add.
Smisir, I think you took all the good points. Sam, Brian, anything to add?
A great answer, obviously, but I'd probably the one thing I'd say is think about materiality assessments, think about material topics. It'll help you prioritize, it'll help you engage your stakeholders and bring everybody with you, and that's so important.
And I'd just add, look towards your peers. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's others who've been thinking about it longer. There's a lot to learn. Thank you.
That's awesome. So I think with that, we will officially wrap up. Thank you again to all of our speakers, like a really amazing amount of information in a short time today. As I said at the beginning, we will redirect you after this to our webinar page. If you haven't already clicked the link from Michelle, the next webinar is on this exact topic of decarbonizing your supply chain, your scope 3. So it'll be a really awesome opportunity to dive in more deeply on that topic. You'll get a survey and you'll get the webinar recording in your email. So please do share feedback with us so we can make our next webinars even better. And if you asked a question that we didn't get to, we will respond via email. Give us a few days, but we'll get to all of those and connect you with the right information. But other than that, we hope to see you next time, and we're going to sign off for now. Thank you so much.